Hey, I'm so glad that you are checking out this message with West Church, whether you are worshiping via live stream or you are worshiping on demand. We are very grateful that you have taken a few minutes out of the busyness of life to see what we have to say. Today, we are going to talk about energy, how we tap into the energy that is provided for us by the power of God, the universe. Some people call it the universe, we call it God, and what we do with that and how we actually tap into it. If you're newer to the West community, we would love to know that you have chosen to spend a few minutes of your day with us. So if you would text the word welcome to the number that you see on your screen, or I'll read it to you in just a few seconds. But if you text the word welcome to the number that you see on your screen, we would love to send you a gift, and then you can choose whether or not you opt in to communications from us. But we're really glad that you are listening to this message, and we hope that today you get something out of it. You think about disciplines that we have in our lives, and how we can create disciplines so that we can tap into the energy that is provided for us to have a wonderful and fulfilled life. Thanks for joining. So it's summertime, and it's a time that we vacation and we go on trips. And so we are actually talking about baggage and luggage, the difference between the two. Our baggage is stuff that we need to leave behind, and the luggage is the stuff that we take with us. 2 weeks ago today, actually, Tom and I were in Oregon, and he was participating in the triathlon there, the Ironman 70.3. And we had quite a little adventure with our luggage on the way. And I just thought this is so interesting and ironic. Like, he had all these bike tools that he had to take. And, we know TSA rules, but apparently some tool was like 2 inches too long to fit in our carry-on. And it was imperative that he have that tool. It's one that he actually puts in his bicycle to take on the race in case like a flat happens or something happens with his gears while he's out doing the race. And for a really long time, we were very perplexed as to how in the world we were going to get that tool with us. And thank goodness we got to the airport early, and thank goodness that the flight was delayed, because it took us a long time to figure out, like, okay, what do we need to move around so that we can get what we need to go where we're going. That's part of what we're talking about with our baggage and our luggage series. Like, what do we need in life to get to where we want to go, to get to where we're going? And so today we are going to talk about the power of energy that comes to us through disciplines. And as followers of Jesus, as followers of the way, we are going to tie that into spiritual disciplines. So I told you that Tom did an Ironman a couple of weeks ago. He did his first one last year. He did a second one this year. And so I've gotten sort of used to his routine. If you'll look at the image you see on your screen, it is a spring energy gel pack. It has like 250 calories, and it's what he uses when he's out riding his bike for a 3 or 4 hour bike ride, so that it gives him the nutrients that he needs to be able to keep going. Well, one day I was at work, and I get this picture come over my cell phone, and it said, well, Axel is up to his old tricks. Now, Axel is our German Shepherd, and back before Christmas, we did a message series on the lessons that we can learn from our pets, our dog friends, and lessons we can learn about God. And I shared lots of stories with you about Axel. We love him. I mean, he is just the biggest, like, oaf. He's not what you would think of when you think of a German Shepherd. He's not, he has a big bark, and then he runs from you and he hides behind either Tom or me. But we love him. But they said he's food motivated. He is not food motivated. He is food obsessed. And so, like, Axel's eaten, his palate is more diverse than probably mine or yours. He's eaten everything from pasta salad to flip-flops to, cornbread. I mean, a whole plate of brownies, tortilla shells in their wrapper. And the latest victim of Axel's appetite was the gel pack. Now, every morning when Tom is getting ready to go on one of his big rides, he lays all his stuff out. And before the race, he had this notebook and he had a checklist. And I've just been so impressed with how he comes across with all this discipline and all these different parts and pieces to this whole event. And actually, it helped him get across the finish line. The gel packs, like, apparently they were so desired by Axel, but they're really important. They're a part of what he does. And so he always has them laid out and just so. And I've really admired, which is why I could never be a triathlete or any kind of athlete. I don't have that discipline. Like, it really takes discipline and self-control to be able to accomplish those goals. This is a picture of us after the race a couple of weeks ago. He made it across the finish line. He was not about wearing his medal, but we had this opportunity to have a picture with an alpaca, and it just had the coolest teeth. And so he put his medal on for the picture, not because he's showy, but I was just so impressed with all the 2,500 athletes there, because it really takes discipline to be able to accomplish something like that. Discipline is what is required to get from where we are right now to where we want to be. So this morning I want you to think about, or today as you're listening to this on demand, I want you to think about, where do you want to be? Like, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Like, what goals do you have for yourself? Because the way that you get from where you are right now to where you want to be is how you set your goals. And then you have to apply that discipline. So discipline actually can be thought of as a bridge. So the next time that you drive across a bridge, I want you to think about the word discipline. Discipline is our bridge to get us from where we are to where we want to go and where we want to be. Abraham Lincoln said that discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. So with Tom's triathlon training, every day, there was one day a week that he would take off, but every day had some pretty rigorous exercise. Like, he either swam and biked, or swam and ran, or ran and biked, and hours. And so he'd have to get up like really, really, really early to be able to accomplish those goals. Now, there were lots of times that, it'd be blistering hot and so humid here in North Carolina, and he'd be like, I just don't want to do this. But, like Abraham Lincoln says, like, discipline has to be not what we want right now, but what we want most. What Tom wanted most for his triathlon was to be able to get across the finish line in the time that he had set for himself. And so he had to do certain things to get there. Now, look, I'm not, like I said, an athlete. But there are goals that I have for me in my life that I want to achieve. And in order to achieve them, I have to have some discipline. And I don't know, I grew up with a military father. He had just retired from the military. He had served 22 years in the Army. He was a master sergeant. And I think he missed the memo sometimes that I was not one of his privates, because, he had a very stern tone, and he was all about discipline. You made your bed every day. You did chores. You did this. You did this. And so I lived in a very rigid upbringing. And I think maybe now now my total lack of discipline is the fact that I'm in charge of me. And so, like, I don't have to do what other people tell me to do. So I like to just fly, which is unfortunate for a lot of people in my midst. But I like to fly sometimes just by the seat of my pants. I don't have this rigid discipline. And you know what? There are lots of things that I miss out on because I'm not a disciplined person. Like, it really takes extreme focus for me to say, here I am, here's my goal, and here's how I want to get there. Luckily, I have folks in my life, leaders at West, and friends and family in my personal life that surround me that they have discipline, so they coach me and help me get to that place. But this morning, today, I really want us to set aside a goal that we have for ourselves. And I want us to think really intentionally about what discipline do we need to impose in our lives to help us get there. So there's this idea of discipline and personal discipline and self-discipline and all that stuff is great. But, we are not Oprah, and this is not a self-help talk. This actually has something deeper to it. And disciplines are deeper than just the personal dedication and the habits that we form. There's something called spiritual disciplines. And I promise if we will look at those and if we will choose one or two of those that we adhere to, that is how we will find the energy and we will tap into that energy that is deep within us that will carry us in and through all things. And that's why this matters. That's why this matters, because no matter what we face in life, we're going to have to find a way in it and through it. And sometimes life goes along and it's all good and it's easy, and then other times it isn't. Sometimes the things that we wrestle with deep within us, they require all of our energy to try to overcome. And so I want to give us some really tangible ways that we can fight the things that loom ahead of us, the hurdles that seem to tear us down. There is a scripture verse that we are going to look at today. It is taken from the book of Proverbs. It says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but those who hate to be rebuked are stupid." I had to laugh when I read that, and I thought, is this the Message translation? That's the modern day version of scripture that we typically use at West. It was translated by Eugene Peterson and traced back to the original Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic, but in a modern conversational language. So that's the version that we usually look at West. It's called the Message. But this one was actually taken from the New Revised Standard Version, which was the version that we would rely on most often before we started using the Message. And I thought it was so interesting and sort of funny that it says the word stupid in the Bible. But that's so important because it's like, if we're willing to practice discipline, if we're willing to be disciplined in our lives, then that's how we gain knowledge and that's how we gain wisdom. But if we're not willing to have that, if we're not willing to look at things and say, oh my gosh, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something, then frankly, we're stupid. Where can you use more discipline in your life? Where can we use more discipline in our lives? It's important to acknowledge that when we're trying to learn something new or start a new habit like spiritual disciplines, that some are going to fit and some are going to work. And then, you know what? We cannot all do all things well. We are geared and created certain ways. And, long time ago, the leadership experts used to say that if you had deficiencies in your areas of performance, that's where you needed to spend the majority of your time trying to work on your areas of deficiency so that you could raise the bar with those and so that they would come closer to your areas of expertise. But then research started showing that was not a good idea, and that actually in our leadership and in our careers and our pathways, we should focus most of our time and our energy on the top 80% of things that we do really well that nobody else can do but us. And then, there are things on the bottom tier that we have to do, but quit trying to make ourselves great at the things we're never going to be great at. I am never going to be a CPA. I am never going to spend hours and hours on end with Excel spreadsheets. I can do them. I can understand them. I can sort of manipulate them with formulas and figure stuff out. But guess what? That's not my area of expertise. So why would we keep doing that? In a few minutes, I'm going to show you all the spiritual disciplines that we have outlined in classic faith tradition. These trace back all the way to the early church fathers and church mothers, and I want you to pick one or two that you can focus on. But it's really important to acknowledge that there are some things that we can't learn, and we can't learn to do well because it's just not in our wheelhouse. Funny story for you, I told you about Tom's triathlon, and part of that is a 56, I believe, mile bike ride. And it's in Oregon, and one of the things that he likes to do before the race actually starts is to ride the bike course. And so we were in Oregon. I've never been to Oregon before, and when he did the race in Augusta, I was all in and his biggest cheerleader, still was his biggest cheerleader, but I just have been so busy. I hadn't done my own prep work, looking at the course and all that kind of stuff. So the morning before the race, he wanted to just do a drive of the bike course and then ride just a little bit to make sure his bike was working, etc. And I'm like, okay. So I put the directions in my GPS, and unbeknownst to me, even though I have tried so hard to learn what the arrows mean and what the directions mean, I just cannot figure out how to read the map. I need it to just tell me point by point by point where to go, when to turn, and how to get there. In fact, it was so bad that as we were riding the bike course, we came upon this sign that you see on your screen right now. Now, it's important to note that if you are doing a bike course for an Ironman triathlon, the odds of you getting your bike on a ferry to go across the river are not good. The ferry was not a part of the bike course. And so we get up to there, and Tom just sort of looks at me, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm following the GPS. I'm trying to ride the bike course for you." And he's like, "Andrea, really? I've asked you to do one thing in our time together, and that's to learn how to read a map." And I'm trying to convince him, look, I can try all I want to. It's just not going to happen. It's important to remember that, as we try to apply disciplines, the fact is probably I can learn. It's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And there's always, things fighting against us. So as you try to embrace disciplines and spiritual disciplines, I want us to remember that it's really easy to get discouraged. And it's really easy to get overwhelmed. The prophet Isaiah, when he was writing in the Hebrew scriptures, when he was writing to the people, he was a prophet. And he was trying to tell them, look, don't give up. Don't assume that you can't make it through, that God is always providing. And he's like, look, wicked people will perish. It will be like they get stuck in the mire and the dirt because it's always getting swarmed up. He said, our life is like the sea. And I thought, what a beautiful analogy, our life is like the sea. And what happens in a sea when the waves come? Well, the waves and the perpetual motion, it stirs up all kinds of dirt and muck. Now, beautiful things can be left behind as the waters recede, but in the middle of it, it creates like its own little inner storm and its own little chaos. Lots of times in our lives, it's as if we get stuck in quicksand. We have all that mire and that dirt that is going around us. It's called the human nature, and we as a people of faith refer to it as sin. That which consumes us, that which holds us back from being at one with love and at one with joy and at one with peace. The things that get in the way of us being totally immersed in love and joy and peace, those energies, those things are called sin. And it's like that sea, and that's why Isaiah said, we're like the wicked people stuck in the mire and the dirt. We're like stuck in the midst of the waves of the sea. But we need to remember that we don't have to be stuck. Like, we can get out. It isn't actually, it doesn't have to be quicksand. We can find a way out. And so I want to give us some real practical ways to do that. There are different kinds of disciplines. And look, I know that this is not sexy and fun, like, and feel good. But we've got to have tangible things in our lives to help us be who we're called to be, to help us get from here to there, to help us go across that bridge. And these are those things. I want you to think of each of these disciplines as a bridge. So first, there are inward disciplines, like things that we do only within ourselves that no one else can do for us or with us. And these help us tap into that energy that is already deep within. Meditation, like sitting and just focusing on our breath patterns and trying to find a way to tap into the inner peace and solace that is within us. Or prayer. And I'm not talking about prayer like when we're riding down the road and we're having conversation with God. That's okay. But in the New Testament, when Jesus was teaching his followers how to pray, he said, I want you go into a room in your house, go into a quiet space, and then all alone go to God in prayer. Now, think about the houses back then. They weren't like we have now with doors and insulation and padding. Like, it would have been a big deal for Jesus to tell them to go into their homes, into a quiet space to pray. I mean, their doors were made out of like leather, if they even had a door. So that tells us that prayer, that one-on-one intentional conversation with the divine, it's really, really important. Fasting is another discipline, and I'm not talking about intermittent fasting, which is all the rage now, so we can lose weight. I'm talking about intentional fasting. It's why during the season of Lent, the 40 days before Easter, we try to fast, we try to give up something, so that when we give it up, we are more mindful every time we want that thing to be mindful about Christ, about Jesus, the Christ, and how when there were things that we are certain he wanted, he chose not to follow his wants, but chose to follow the path of love. So fasting is a spiritual discipline that we can apply to our lives. And then study. Like, when's the last time you read scripture or read a devotion just for the purpose of gaining knowledge and wisdom? Study matters. So those are our internal disciplines, and then there are outward spiritual disciplines, and these are things that we do that impact not just ourselves, but others around us. Simplicity is one of those things, like simplicity in what we have, simplicity in how we live. Solitude is also really important. Sometimes we don't like to be alone. Years ago, when I first studied the spiritual disciplines, I did it with a small group Bible study, and we were walking through Richard Foster and Dallas Willard's compilation of the study of spiritual disciplines. And so each week was a different discipline that we studied, and we got to the discipline of solitude. And it talked about how you need to spend time by yourself. And it asked the question, the last time that you had time to be only with yourself, what did you do? Now, this was like, gosh, probably 20 years ago when I first started studying this. And my kids were really young. And on my day off, which was Thursday back then, like as soon as my day off would start, I would run errands. And we lived out in Denver, Sherrills Ford area, but the church was in Mooresville. So I would always run errands closest to the church. It was a big church, so I would always run into people that I knew. And I'd end up chatting and spending most of my day just, running around and having conversations. It took me studying the spiritual disciplines to realize that, I had some stuff that I needed to work through. And when I would spend time alone, that stuff sort of would rise to the surface. And I'd have to think through things and not just be able to repress things that I didn't want to deal with, my own fears and my own feelings of inadequacy. So when I went through the study, I'm like, okay, the next Thursday that I have off, I'm actually going to be off. I'm going to take a Sabbath and be alone. At first, it was uncomfortable, but then what I found is as time went on, I began to cherish that time. And I understand and value that others need it as well. Like, we need time to just be, because it's when we just be with our thoughts and our fears, our anxieties, our hopes and our dreams that we can work through them. The spiritual discipline of solitude is really, really important. And then the other two, service and generosity. That's how we experience God. Back at Christmas, we do this thing called Ding Dong Ditch, and it's when we give Christmas gifts to families anonymously. And they don't have to be a food insecure or need housing. They just may need a little extra love this Christmas season. It's all about sharing love, not about sharing monetary value and stuff. But we do that through the celebration of things at Christmas, and so it takes money. It was just a divine thing that one gentleman wrote me a few weeks before Christmas and said, hey, what do you need for Ding Dong Ditch? Give me a number. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm like, what do you mean give you a number? And he's like, I want a number of what you need for Ding Dong Ditch. And so I called him. I'm like, I'm having a hard time right now. I don't really know what you mean. And he said, do you need money? I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. And he said, well, give me a number. So, and he told me to aim big, so I did. I met him at the office a few days later for him to give me the check. And I said, you look a lot like Jesus right now. Thank you for doing this. And he shook his head and he's like, I'm not anything like Jesus. I'm like, actually, yeah, you are. I said, because you are giving of yourself and you're giving of your resources and you're doing it so generously. Like, you have no idea how many families that you are impacting. And because his donation was more than I had even asked for, and he told me about some big deal that they were running at one of the stores that if you buy gift cards, they'll give you so many free. Like, we were able to get so many gift cards that we had more than enough to give out at Christmas. So this past week, one of our West families has a member of their family in ICU in Charlotte, and They've been there a couple of weeks now. And you can imagine, like being with your loved one in the hospital, in ICU, on a ventilator. Like, life keeps happening, and it's really hard to make all the things that need to happen with life keep happening. Their small group got together and gave them gift cards so they could find meals. And they said, "Do we have any extra, like, West gift cards?" I'm like, oh my gosh. Because that person back at Christmas tapped into the spiritual discipline of service and generosity like a family 7 months later. There really has a significant need right now. They have some DoorDash meals that now they can have and not have to worry about paying for them because someone practiced a spiritual discipline. And I promise, when we practice these disciplines, like, not only do we grow and not only do we make it across the bridge, but like the world is better. And when we actively work to make the world better, our lives end up better too. That's what that gentleman said that day that I told him that he looked a lot like Jesus. He said, actually, this is my way of experiencing and feeling God at Christmas, to be able to do this. So I just want you to know that it matters. So we have the inward disciplines and we have the outward disciplines. And then it's a fancy church word. It says corporate disciplines. But what that means is that these disciplines are ones that we do with other people. Like, we can't do them alone for them to have the same impact. One is confession. No, we're not Catholic, and no, I do not want you to call me and tell me the things that you need to confess so that you can feel closer to God. But there is power in finding a spiritual friend that you can confess things to and say, look, I'm not who I want to be right now. And will you help me and will you support me as I try to work through this? Confession is a real thing, and it's valuable when we do it, and we do it with those that love us and will support us through it. And then worship, like you're here now, right? Whether you are on demand or you're live streaming, like you're gathered with other people. We're learning what that looks like in today's culture. We're just trying to feel connection and community. And granted, we believe as West that even though it's nice and warm and fuzzy when we gather together in a sacred space all together, that, power comes in community, whether we're just sharing the same ideas or the same words. And that was proven to me this week. So D-Row and Prosper and Blaze and Jimmy and Raid and the other leadership team in Kagumba, Uganda, they had their first public worship last week. They've been doing some preview things, but last weekend they had their first service in Kagumba at the hotel that's partnering with them to be their sacred space. They were so excited. D-Row sent me pictures and videos, and they had new people come. People beyond their launch team. Well, D-Row and Blaze and Prosper, they live in Entebbe, or Kampala, actually, which is like a 3-hour drive from Kagumba. Kagumba is where D-Row and Prosper and Blaze grew up, and it's their village. It's a very rural, remote village with a lot of need. So they're very passionate about taking the message there to the folks there. So they travel back and forth every weekend to create this faith community there. So when they got back to Kampala late last Sunday night and they walked into their apartment, they were shocked to realize that they had been robbed. The laptop that we took over for D-Row and the phones that we took over for his launch team so that they could take pictures and things like that. Our old cell phones and our old laptops that we dispose of so easily, to them, they're so important. So actually, if you have an old laptop or you have an old phone, I'm going over after Labor Day. I'd love to be able to take those to them, or an old iPad. I mean, those are so invaluable to them. But anyway, D Rose sent me a message. I got it right after worship last Sunday, and he's like, "We've been robbed." I did a FaceTime call with him, or a WhatsApp call, and they were at the police station trying to file a report. And I mean, they won't get those things back. And he was so devastated. One of the things that I admire about D-Row and his team is they do not ask us for money. I've tried to start other partnerships in other places in the world, and because we are perceived to be, well, we are wealthy, relatively speaking, people end up asking for money a lot, and that's just not okay. That's not what a partnership is, and we're not rolling in it either. So I'm like, it has to be a true partnership, and D-Row never asked for money. He didn't ask for money last Sunday either. He just wanted prayer and support. But I thought, you know what? I feel like if I reach out to West and I say, hey, I don't normally do this, like send you an email on a Monday asking for money, but we need some money because we didn't budget in this year's budget for a robbery in Uganda and for someone to take all their stuff. You know what? By the end of Monday, we had over, I think, $3,000. That's a lot for just a one-day ask. The thing that I found so interesting is, like, when I pull up reports like that, I mean, it had the names of the individuals that had given. And not that I'm, like, judging or anything, but I was like, wow, the power of worship and the power of community. Because it's a lot of folks that I never see. But yet, you're still connected. That's powerful. And that's community. Worshiping together, whether it's by reading the devotions that come out, or watching the messages, or watching Growth Co. Podcast, or Monday meditations, those things, staying connected, it matters. And it's a discipline. Worship is a discipline. And the last one is celebration. Like, there's something to be said for coming together, like we did last Sunday, and saying, look at what we were able to be a part of, a small part of in our community. Over 850 students getting new backpacks and tennis shoes and school supplies. Like, we can celebrate that God is at work in that. We can celebrate that the Bash is bigger than West or any other nonprofit or local charity organization, that the Bash is a true community event. And so much so that one of the guests who came like 11 years ago now serves at the Bash every single year, because she's at a different place now. She was going through a terrible divorce and had 4 kids and needed the help that the Bash provided. And so then she sought to give back. Like, we can celebrate that. When we celebrate the ways that God is at work in our lives, like, we get goosebumps. And I've heard the goosebumps referred to as cosmic applause. The next time you get goosebumps and you're in a conversation with somebody, think about that. It's cosmic applause. The universe is clapping. It's a beautiful idea. What if we create ways for there to be cosmic applause through our spiritual disciplines? I admire Tom's discipline and how he applies it to be an athlete. But truth is, like, it's not just a flash in the pan. He's disciplined about everything that he does, from work to social to athleticism and his health. He's just a disciplined person. I have a lot to learn about that. And I believe that if I will try to be a more disciplined human and really practice these spiritual disciplines, if you will practice the spiritual disciplines, our lives will be like the best luggage that we can take anywhere we want to go. It'll roll so easy. It won't be bulky with a bunch of junk in it. We'll be able to go across that bridge and get from where we are to where we want to be. I visited Mount St. Helens a few weeks ago. It was a powerful, powerful sight. I'm sure at some other point there were so many just ideas and conversations that I was able to have with God when I was there in just that beautiful and sacred space. But so you'll be hearing about that more and more. But one of the things that I was struck by is that the energy that erupted that mountain, it didn't like go off the top, it like blew off the whole side of the mountain. It was massive, and it had destruction like 15 miles away. One of the stories that I read in the monument near there was about a family that were camping on the morning that the mountain, the volcano, erupted. A family and actually a scout troop, and they had hoped that they would see some action or activity because folks knew that things were going on, but they didn't expect it to erupt that day. And the story is that this father and son were getting ready to cut down some wood for their campfire, and they had the axe in their hands. And all of a sudden, like, they hear this huge cosmic boom, and they look up and they see this cloud, and then it was so dark you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. They didn't really know what all was going on. Like I said, they were out getting ready to cut wood, and so the dad picked up his axe off of the ground. Now, keep in mind, there's no lava, there's no nothing, happening on their site right there. It's just very dark, and they had heard the boom. When he picked up his axe, it shocked him, like really, really bad, and he ended up throwing it out of his hands because it burnt his hands so much. The energy from that volcano eruption 15 miles away transferred so much through the air that it was present in the matter that made up that axe, so that when they picked it up by its wooden handle, it shocked them. That's some powerful, powerful energy. Yesterday, I had prayer with one of our members that is in ICU. And I said, look, every bit of your tenacity and every bit of your energy, we want you to tap into that and just try your very best to heal. We recognize that healing comes in a lot of ways, and right now we don't know how he will come through this, but just use your energy to heal. When I looked in his eyes, the awareness and the knowledge of what I was saying, it was there. It was a powerful, powerful spiritual moment. Look, we don't all have to have those bedside moments to feel that energy. We can feel it anytime, any day, any place. And the spiritual disciplines, they're our bridge and they're our way. I hope you'll pick one with me this week. And I hope we'll apply it to our lives so that we can be who it is that we're created in the image of God to be. I invite you to pray with me. Gracious God, the gift of the power that you have given us is so great. And we can use it for good in the world, but we also can use it for ourselves, to heal ourselves, to help us be the people that you've created us to be. To live a life of love and hope and joy. Thank you for being a God that loves us, that gives us that energy, that forgives us when we fall short of being who it is that you call us to be and we get stuck in our own mire and dirt. We offer ourselves to you right now. Help us feel that power. Help us claim a discipline or two and make it our own so that we may be who you call us to be. We offer ourselves to you in Christ's name. Amen. I really want you to try a discipline this week. I'd love to hear on the West Facebook page or any of our other social media platforms, like, what discipline do you try and does it work? Let's do it together. Have a great week.